Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Cheaper Than Therapy. We have another coaching session today. So, today we are talking to Sarah. And Sarah, you wrote in with kind of an interesting family
Mm.
struggle. It sounds like you were out of town and husband's folks were watching kiddos at your house. And your folks came over, kind of had like a nice family time when you weren't there.
Mm.
And your backyard kind of ring camera, right? Like recorded a conversation that they were having that you overheard and listened to in the recording. And it was all about you in particular. It felt like it was really kind of scrutinizing or maybe kind of bashing on you as a mom, as a
Mm.
parent, as in your job. Essentially, a lot of like character attacks is what it felt like for you, and you're feeling a little stuck right now. Like, what do I do with this information? What do I do now? How do I heal? How do I repair?
Mm.
Right?
Yes. Yeah, this took place about 2 months ago now, and we've had some conversations. Some things have happened in the last 2 months where we've
Okay.
had some time to process it. Um, yes, the conversation was recorded and then exposed. While we were still away on that trip, we were hearing that a couple of days later. Um, so it just really impacted our trip. It was just the two of us on
Mm.
that trip. And then coming back, I wasn't really sure what to do. I really wanted to explode because I was so angry and just confused and shocked by this information. And I think since I've had time to process it, um, the biggest stab in the back has felt from my mother-in-law out of the four people that
Mm.
discussed it. But yes, you said it correctly to where I felt like I was attacked from all angles,
Mm.
scrutinized on all levels. And I think to add a little bit more to the story is that my parents, who my in-laws spoke with, they're not my biological parents. I have a
Mm.
family in the US and a family abroad. I come from a Russian-speaking culture. I was born there. Um, I moved to the US over 15 years ago, so I have a mix of both cultures.
Mm.
So the parents are not my biological parents, but they took me in when I was younger, when I was a teenager, and so have really changed my life, impacted um, kind of the journey that I've been on. So I see them as my parents, but not in the same way as biological parents. I still have a living mom. My dad has passed away. So it's a little bit, it adds, I think it's important to add because they are not my
Mm.
biological parents.
Sure.
And so I think that's important in the story because it felt like four people, nobody really stood up for me in that conversation, and everybody had something to say. It felt like all four people kind of found one monster to discuss, right? And like one person to
Mm.
attack, one enemy, and people that are supposed to stand up for you and love you unconditionally felt something wrong about me from all different angles. And when I've had some time to process it. And then we spoke to my parents in person, and kind of addressing it with them. Their explanation was that they've had some frustrations built up over the years that hasn't been expressed. And so they were just venting.
Mm.
And the venting just really overextended to that hour and a half. And so, of course, I mean, they have been apologizing and just really remorseful and really ashamed of participating in the conversation, and so have been my in-laws.
Mm.
I'm having a harder time letting go of what I heard, again, by my in-laws, particularly from my mother-in-law, because my husband and I have been together for 10 years. We have never had any kind of hard conversation, I'll call it that, with my in-laws. It's always been
Mhm.
kind of, you know, things are great. They come to visit, they live out of town. So they come to visit us. We see them in general in a year, probably 4 to 5 times a year.
Mhm.
So when they're here, especially we have two kids, so especially the last 5 years, they'll come and visit more time, right, with the kids.
Yep.
That's kind of their first priority, what it feels like.
Mm-hmm.
So it's tougher to manage that, not, I can't even call it a conflict because it feels so much bigger than that.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
This weird situation because I don't know how to move forward, with
Mm-hmm.
mostly with my in-laws. And I think that's my biggest question with this is I've accepted the fact, and I've been through therapy a lot, the last 10, 15 years. So I know certain, resources and basic things that I can do for myself, and have reached out to a therapist as
Mm-hmm.
well. But I'm now at a point where I think I need some direct guidance on, okay, what can be done here? Because I understand that the relationship that I had with my in-laws can no longer exist the way it was, right? Like that's kind
Mm-hmm.
of in the past. That's kind of how I see it. I've grieved that, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking for advice on how to build something new with them. I can't say honestly that I'm ready to build something new with them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I understand that for them, this is probably really the only conflict and the biggest conflict that they've had in their lives. Um, and they're ready to kind of move on. Like I'm
Mm-hmm.
constantly getting messages and, information from my mother-in-law, like, can we talk? Can we come see you? Can we just get all, can we just move on? Can we talk about
Mm-hmm.
this? And I've been the one that pumped the brakes, and I've told my husband, like, can you please tell her to back off? Otherwise I will explode more. Because at this point I've asked for space, and I'm not quite getting it. Their idea of getting this resolved, it's like it needs to happen now because they've never had conflict in their lives that I know about. So it's this family dynamic where things have always been kind of fine and great. And, I think they're so anxious to get
Yeah.
this resolved. And so I'm stuck at this hard place where I'm using the space for myself, but I know that at some point I'm gonna have to do something. Like we had a
Mm-hmm.
trip planned at the end of August that I think we're scratching. Um, so that we actually, all families were supposed to be together, and we're scratching that because it's too hard for me to pretend
Yeah.
like nothing is wrong. It's, I think, awkward for the rest of the family. Plus, my husband's brother, his parents, my in-laws, have said that they absolutely do not want for his brother to ever know about this. They
Okay.
don't want for them to know. So just to kind of paint you a
Yep.
picture of the
Okay.
kind of people I'm working with and
Okay.
the struggle that I'm having. But so I'm open to any and all advice on how to navigate
Yep.
this.
Yeah. Well, so I kind of want to start here if we can, Sarah, because if you've listened to Vanessa and I know, or now for a bit, or I'm assuming you did, you
Yes,
wrote
I
in to
have.
talk to us, you know that Vanessa and I, and sort of the flag that we are constantly waving is around personal responsibility, and that the person that we get to control in this life is the one that we see in the mirror, and that's it. And so I really want to ask you to do a little bit of self-reflecting as you think about, like, how did we get here?
Mm.
Around, like, what was my motivation? Now I know that when you initially wrote in, you said there was like some issues with the backyard and a peeping tom and some things in the
Mm-hmm.
past, but when I sat down to watch this conversation between my parents and my in-laws, I'm wondering about issues around trust and what was breached, like in the past, or what level of trust was there previously. Like, did I
Mm-hmm.
trust these people really? But also control. And I'm
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
curious, like, what those words bring up for you, even like visceral response as I say them. But like, what was my intention as I listened to that? Because it's this thing of, I work with a lot of couples, and a lot of times couples come to see me when they're in the crisis point of, a betrayal or infidelity. And a lot of times it's someone's like gone through someone's text messages. And I always say, like, if we go looking for a mess, we're going to find one. But
Mm-hmm.
here's the thing, what it brings to the surface is some of the things that, like, maybe the universe was inviting us to
Mm.
really get real about. And I'm curious around, like, if you go back and say, okay, like, what was my motivation there? What would you say it was to, like, listen to something that ultimately was deeply harmful to you to hear?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
What was the motivation? Um, I don't know. Nothing comes up right now, but as you say the word control, it takes me back to my childhood. And I bring this up not to use that
Mm.
as myself as a victim, but I did grow up with a lot of chaos. My biological family, I'm sorry, I'm going to get emotional because I just came back from seeing my family back home.
Mm.
Um, but I did grow up with a lot of chaos. I was kind of the peacemaker in my
Mm.
family. I grew up with a family of alcoholics. My mom and one of my brothers are no longer uh, addicted, but it was a lot of chaos in my family, and so um, I I I know myself to be a controlling person,
Mm.
and I think for my in-laws who seem to be easygoing and nothing bothers them, somebody like me who is very different, and I think that's one of the notes that I wrote down too, is that um, I think that's what attracted my husband and me, is that I'm
Mm.
very different from how we see the world and how we are, as I'm sure it does with other couples. But for my in-laws, because they only see me, right, like a couple of times a year, they see me as this controlling person. So when they come and
Mm.
visit, they see me stressed out, right? Like I'm a full-time mom, a full-time person. I work
Mm.
full-time. We have two young kids. They come to visit. I roll out the red carpet, and so they kind of get to see this stressed out person that, and one of the things that was brought up when we spoke with them is that, they feel like they have to walk on eggshells when they're here because they can't seem to get anything right when they're in our house. And I'm saying,
Mm.
okay, well, this is my house. There's a certain way that I do want to dishes to be done. It's not that you can, I think, walk into somebody's house as an in-law and be like, I'm here to help. Aren't you just so grateful? And I am, but there should be a certain level of like,
Mm.
okay, I'm here to help with what you need help with, right? Not just like bow down to me because I washed your dishes.
Right.
So I know that I'm kind of walking around all over the place, but as you bring up the word control, that was one of the things that was brought up by them, and I know myself to be a controlling person and try to organize my life in such a way that feels safe. Um,
Yes.
because I grew up with so much chaos,
Mm-hmm.
and I know what works for me
Mm-hmm.
to help me operate better as a human being every day. So I can see how that can trigger the wrong thing in other people.
Yeah.
But the motivation, I think, in seeing, I mean, I think I was suspecting, right? Like there was probably a level of mistrust, and a level of mistrust to a degree where things are not, how do I explain it? I don't always, I question when people say that things are always great and rosy and
Mm.
nothing is
Sure.
ever wrong and it's fine, this is fine, and this is fine. I don't trust that because my personality and the way I grew up, I'm always kind of, I'm on high
High
alert
alert.
for things to go wrong. And so I think that's just kind of my natural instinct, and that's what helped me survive the chaos that I lived for many years. So
But
I'm
Sarah, can I jump in really quick? I just want to,
mm,
I'm gonna cut you short a little bit because I want to make
sure,
sure, obviously being mindful of time here
right.
too. Everything that you're saying feels so, God, how do I say this? It's like what Danae was saying, where it's almost like the universe was like serving something up to you. Mm.
Yeah.
Right? If we're really real with ourselves and we go, okay, I know about myself that I can be controlling. I like things done a certain way. If I put myself in somebody else's shoes, I can maybe see how it feels to them or seems to them. It's almost like you're kind of holding there's two different things that you're holding right now
Mhm.
with this situation, right? You're holding what's the word I'm thinking of? I was going to say unasked for feedback. What's that word? Something about feedback, like
Unsolicited
thank
feedback.
you. I'm like, what's that word? Unsolicited.
Yeah.
Like you're holding essentially unsolicited feedback that stings
Mhm.
and also is possibly there's some truth in this
Hmm.
feedback
Yes.
that like, ugh, like gross, this feeling in my gut of like, this is shit I know about myself. And maybe there's an opportunity here to
Hmm.
actually sit with some of this feedback. And instead of immediately getting defensive and pushing it back out, saying, what about this actually feels true?
Hmm.
And what about this can I take in as almost like an opportunity, right? There's that part of it. And then there's the part of it that feels like the betrayal and the hurt around these are people in my family and all the things you're saying, like they're very conflict avoidant. And so all of that just doesn't resonate with you. So it's like there's that, but there's also this other part. And I almost feel like
Mm.
they're almost like two different things going on at one time. I
Mm.
think part of the way that I see part of a repair air quote, I think the repair has to come from also personal accountability and personal responsibility. Like, I think
Mhm.
they kind of go hand in hand in this, which is to say, and I don't know, Danae, jump in here on this because I'm kind of just riffing as it's coming to my mind, but it's like what I heard you all say was X, Y, and Z. It was exceptionally hurtful to know that you were talking about me behind my back and not coming to my face to have these kind of conversations. So,
Mhm.
one part of this relationship is we're not doing that anymore. We are now talking about things and we're bringing grievances to the table because that's not how I'm raising my children. That's not how we are in my home, right? That might be how you all are, but like just know that that's not how I am. So I ask you moving forward if there are things that you want to talk about that you bring it to me, right? That's like
Right.
one thing. The other thing though is and what I heard you say is this, and I
Mhm.
have to tell you I'm taking that in and I'm
Mm.
doing my best to sit with the kernels of truth that might
Mhm.
actually be in what you were saying that hurt me so deeply because yes, it's like it feels like they're talking about you, but also it hurts because you might actually feel like there's some truth in what they're saying.
Sure. Yes.
Because if you thought that it was all bullshit, you wouldn't be as upset about it.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like
Right.
that's the shit that gets to us is when it feels on some level like there's some truth in what's being said. That's what stings. And
Mhm.
so that's why I feel like there's like these two things happening here.
Yep.
Yeah, can I just sort of like an as an add-on to something you just said, V, because I so deeply agree and love what you just said. And I think that something that you said, Sarah, um, was that conflict is really difficult for them. And like
Mhm.
being in the space of having transparent conversations is not something that they are good at. And so I want to kind of humanize this a little bit.
Mhm.
And so maybe I would soften just a bit instead of like, this is what we're not going to do, which feels like a demand for compliance. I would say, I am inviting you to like say, like, yes, I was so deeply hurt, but I realized everything that V said, that there may have been some truth in that. And I would love if we could have a different relationship. I would love if there's something that I'm doing, I want you to know that I'm open to hearing it. But here's the thing I want to like humanize about this. As a release valve, venting is actually a really human thing that we all do. And I'll be real with you, Sarah. There are very few people on this planet I love more than Vanessa. And I know for sure Vanessa talks about me sometimes behind my back. Like it's a human thing. I
Oh boy.
promise. When she's frustrated with me, she goes and she vents that to other people. And I wouldn't want to hear it because it would hurt. But also, I would still know that she loves me and that the
Mm.
bigger truth of how she holds me and what she believes to be true about me is not what she says in the moments that she's most frustrated with me, you know?
Mm.
So
Mhm.
a little bit, I want to hold that, like, we got to give a little grace to sometimes
The humanity.
people say things in their human when they're frustrated. And that doesn't mean that's how they truly hold you, what they believe to be true about who you are. It's a very human thing. And we all do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I hear that. It's hard to kind of accept it because I think for an hour, like I'm holding on to these like number, like not even numbers, but like I know for an hour and a half, right? Like four people talk
Mm,
trash about me. So it's almost like it's hard to see the bigger picture outside of what was said and what was heard because there's very little positive things said, and so I'm having a hard time of letting go of that. Okay, like, oh, there's a possibility they think positively of me or highly of me, right, in other areas because all that's stuck in my mind. Plus it's recorded. I don't have that video anymore, but I do have snippets of it. I took notes of it. And
Ugh.
so it's hard not to replay that in my head. And at this point, we are not
But okay,
communicating
hang
within
on. I
trust.
want to both of us. I can see it in me and Danae's face. Because
we're like,
here's
hold
the thing. Here's the thing. I'm going to tell you something that Danae and I both say frequently with couples that come to us when
Hmm.
there's exactly what Danae said. Let's give the example of I went through my husband's phone and I found a text message and I found out that he's cheating on me.
Hmm.
I will still look to the person who went through the phone and say, you breached confidentiality. Like you did not
Hmm.
have the right to
And not
read his text
confidentiality, but
messages. That's
that's an
not even
invasion of their
confidential.
privacy
Invasion
is
of
what deep
Yes.
privacy.
means. Yeah.
Thank you. And so again, this is holding two things that seem like they are opposing truths. They're not. They're both true at once, which is I can still, even in my hurt, none of that is canceled out. You're in pain, your feelings are hurt, and maybe you actually just need a little bit more time, which it sounds like the parent-in-laws are kind of in-laws are kind of like heal, heal, heal. And you're like,
Yes.
I'm not
Yes.
there yet. That's fine. Like you
Yes.
might just need more time. Stop beating yourself up for needing more time and keep telling your husband what you've been telling him, which is like, tell him to back off. I still need more time to lick my wounds. So there's that. And I still think there's some really amazing, juicy, deep work to be done in this around personal responsibility.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And, you know, as much as I gotta just say, Sarah, that thing of like, I'm keeping snippets of this and I
Yeah.
took some notes.
I know.
That
That's why
is
we
you
both
sort
were
of
like,
like, were you like perpetuating the suffering? And that is not supporting you in like
no, you're doing
feeling
that to
better and
you.
healing. Like that's like I'm doing that
Yeah.
almost like self-harm.
And
I'm
by
gonna
the
like,
way, that's a little addictive. That's a little
yeah,
bit compulsive, if you ask
yeah.
me.
Yeah.
So
So I'm gonna ask you to not do that because
delete
I
them.
do feel like that is a little bit harmful to yourself, but also it's this thing of like when I work with infidelity, again, if I were in the room while my husband were having an affair and I was listening to him talk about the way he felt about this woman or all of the awful things about his wife, I would believe after listening to an hour plus of what I shouldn't have heard because it's just like our psyche can't process the level of like confusion and like in the human
Hmm.
thing of like it's almost like gang
Betrayal.
mentality. Like we
Yeah.
start to like, oh, it feels like venting and that feels good and
We're
let's pile
connecting over
on and
negativity, which is very common
yes.
for people to do.
And those are human things, but things that I should have never been exposed to, frankly, in the
Hmm.
same way that I would never want to be exposed to the conversations that my husband would have when he's having an affair, like in it, because it would hurt so deeply. And so
Hmm.
I'm saying all that to say it's done. There's nothing you can do about the fact that you heard it, but I really want to advocate for you to stop listening to it and also understand that some of this is what we do when we're caught up in the momentum of a moment that I know for sure these people in your life are not proud of, does not represent all that they are and the truth of how they feel about you. But for your healing, I really want you to stop listening to those
Yeah.
messages,
Yeah.
my love.
Yeah. And I think and rationally, I understand that they're good people, right? And like, I think that's another part. It could be another conversation, but that's a frustration with my
Mm-hmm.
husband is that, that's his parents, right? And his thing is like, well,
Mm-hmm.
they've been good to me these
Mm-hmm.
40 years. And so, but I'm over here still enraged about what I heard. And he shares the frustration, but not to the level that I do because it was all about
Sure.
me, right? And because my parents are not my biological parents, I do think that there's a level of like, oh, well, my parents, that family would not sit around and talk about my husband, right? Like if you reverse the roles where if that conversation had, if they had a chance to come up with stuff about my husband, that wouldn't happen. So the dynamics
Mm-hmm.
of all of that, I think, plays a role. But I do, in the grand scheme of things, I do see and know that they're good people. They've raised my husband, and I'm thankful for that. I just think that was one of the frustrations early on in our relationship too, is that, you know, if I could kind of picture this, I'm a roller coaster and my husband is like just a train, a freight train.
Mm-hmm.
He just
Mm,
kind of goes and there's not a lot of left and right. He just kind of goes and
Mm-hmm.
that's comfortable to him and that's what he knows. And I'm up and down
Mm.
of
That's what
what
you
I've
know.
gone through. Right. That's what I know. And so sometimes there's that level of conflict where you're like, okay, oh my God, can you come join me on my high or come join me on my
Mm.
low? And I think I obviously was not doing this on purpose, but early in our relationship, he felt like he needed to join me on my highs and lows
Mm-hmm.
to demonstrate that he's with me. And now he understands, and we both understand that, okay, like you don't need to just constantly join me or ever join me on these roller coaster rides that I go through because of what I'm experiencing or what I'm
Mm-hmm.
going through and trying to kind of solve. But it's frustrating in a couple that now it's kind of spilling over to other family dynamics
Mm-hmm.
where one partner is like, yep, I feel very angry about it, and I'm over here like, I'm very angry. And so I feel like it's almost impacting our relationship because I want him to get angry with me about this, but he can't because it's his parents and they will love him unconditionally and he loves them unconditionally, but it's not people that I can
Well,
feel
but
that way about.
you know what though? Here's the thing, Sarah. You actually are, and I want you to please don't misunderstand anything I've said to say that you need to be in 100% forgiveness of and welcome these people back into your life with open arms.
I
That is
don't
on
need
you.
to. Hmm.
That is on you to decide.
Hmm.
You are allowed to change your relationship with these people in your life. You're allowed to.
Hmm.
What Danae and I are advocating for is for you to be able to stand back a little bit, right? See some personal responsibility in this, see
Hmm.
some of the uncomfortable truths that might have been shared as opportunities to, grow, evolve, as ways in to the conversation. I think there can be repair, but it's really ultimately up to you how close you want to be or how you want to ultimately change the dynamic or the relationship you have with them. You and your husband don't need to have the same relationship with his parents. Neither one of you is right or wrong. You're just different people. You don't have to
Hmm.
feel the same way. You don't have to act the same way. You don't have to respond to conflict the same way. Like, you know all this logically, right? Yes, it's frustrating. Yes, you can feel very alone in that, but
Hmm.
you know that you're different people. He doesn't need to be in the same place as you, right? And I just say that to say, like, I've had personal experiences, similar-ish experiences in the past within my family where I am still very much close with the people who I had a similar situation. Found out they were talking about me. They were talking about me behind my back, all of this stuff. And also, there's been a slight way that I show up differently in those dynamics. It's not that I don't love them and I'm not intimate and all these things with them, but I have taken accountability for ways that maybe I do something similar. Maybe I like let myself get brought into a triangle that I knew better that I shouldn't have done that. Or I found that I was maybe talking about one person to the other person in an act of venting that I kind of felt icky about. And so I had to really sit with
Hmm.
myself and say, what's my responsibility in how this dynamic is and how it plays out? Because I can't, like Danae said, I can't control them. I can't.
Hmm.
So how can I better, air quote, control me if that's the only thing that I have control over? And so I guess long-winded way to say, I also want to give you permission, like, you're allowed to have a different kind of relationship with them. If it feels, like I said, be upset for a little bit longer if that's what you need. Put better boundaries in place if that's what you need. Maybe don't
Hmm.
extend yourself so much emotionally if that's what you need. All of that is okay as long as you're conscious about the decisions that you're making, right? And
Right.
you're not just kind of being swept away by just the emotion of it. Um, I don't know. I don't know
Yep.
what,
Yeah.
Danae, what's coming up for you.
And I just want to offer like where sometimes V and I might have like what my perspective is that's just a little different. I want to circle back to what you said about the addictive tendency. And like there's a way that when you spoke about the rage, like I watched your body,
Mm-hmm,
like we have
mm-hmm.
this thing that comes up.
Yeah.
Righteousness and rage, Sarah, can be unbelievably addictive.
Addictive.
And a
Hmm.
little bit
That's
we can
right.
get a high off that. And
Yep.
then I
Hmm.
read the thing again and she said this, right? And we can like almost like it
Mm-hmm.
can make us feel powerful. It can make
Hmm.
that little girl inside
Mm-hmm.
of you who felt powerless
And out of
when
Yeah.
control.
life was out of control feel like she gets to control by keeping these people away.
Yep.
I just want to offer that because there's a way that when I do that and when I stay in the rage and the righteousness and that they're like and the dehumanizing of them, what I do is I self-abandon her. I leave
Mm-hmm.
her to focus on them. What she needs is your compassion right now. What she needs is for you to say, yeah, you might be a roller coaster. You might have had to be. You might have had to like roll with the punches and figure out moment to moment, breath to breath, how to survive. How lovely for some others that they didn't have to do that, but you did. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going to shame you for that, little love. That's what you had to do. And so, no, you're not wrong for that. And I'm not going to make you wrong for that now. I
Mm-hmm.
forgive you for your humanity. And I think that when we meet ourselves with a little bit more compassion in our humanity, we have a larger capacity to do that for others, right? But I just want to offer the ways that sometimes we can continue to use the rage and the righteousness as another form of control and pushing people away because it makes the inner child within us that felt powerless feel like they have some sort of power where they haven't had it in the past. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Mm.
Yes. And I think one other thing to add is that, and you've brought it up too, is that, I get to decide. And, for the last 2 months, it's been kind of like, okay, whenever you're ready. And while I want this space, I feel like I still need it for an indefinite amount of time. Even that feels like a lot of pressure in a weird
Mm.
way. Like,
Hmm.
these four people, and maybe,
They're all
and
looking at
then my
you.
husband, they're all like, okay, like
Yeah.
we're giving her space, but like, is she ready now? That's kind of
Mm.
the internal dialogue that I have with myself. It's not
Hmm.
obviously what other people are asking me, but it almost feels like too much pressure
Hmm.
to come up with something, and I'm still not able to come up with something. That's part of the reason I reached out, is that like you said, Nay, is that it almost feels comforting in a way to hold on to some of
Hmm.
this,
Yeah.
because it does give that power. So I think you you noticed it correctly, but at the same time, I'm kind of trapped by feeling the pressure, but also feeling the I feel the need to like okay, I don't want to keep holding on to it, right? But like
Mm.
I don't feel like I have enough time. So it's like this weird spot to be in where I don't want to continue feeling this way. Um, and other people are waiting for me to come up with some kind of plan. I know that they're
Mm.
not, but that pressure comes to me every once in a while. We're like, okay, 2 months, has that been enough?
Mm.
Yeah.
Um, I mean,
So
I don't
I,
know.
I,
Obviously, you don't have the answers either,
yeah,
but it's that's just
Yeah.
another thought.
I think there's a way to, something actually my mother said that was like a very helpful thing for me at one point was like, I think the love and the grace that we can offer a partner sometimes is just the understanding that that puts them a little bit in an impossible bind between
hmm,
loving my wife and still loving my family, which is the truth of how I feel, right?
hmm,
Hmm.
I would take it or chuck it, offer my husband some grace and like, I need time. And that does not mean in solidarity with me, you have to like ice out your family. That's his mama,
Hmm.
like, yes, she made a mistake. And like, I understand like if they want to like whatever that structure looks like for him to like connect with them and be in relationship with his family. And maybe I'm not ready and I
hmm,
don't come or whatever the thing is. But I think there is a little bit of like a soft release and I don't need to hold him in that
hmm,
space
Hmm.
of the cutoff with me. But
Hmm.
I don't know how that feels.
Yes.
yeah. And I,
Yeah.
as we kind of close, I just, again, like, I want to say, like, you have to give yourself a little bit of grace in this process and do your best to try to get out of your head about it.
Mm.
Because I will say too, and I can feel this very deeply in my body, and I can connect to this in some of your story from upbringing. If you also were always the one that had to have it always like all together, and all of the big out of control emotions were taken up by everybody else around you, right? It can also feel really hard to let yourself be upset and hurt and angry sometimes. And yes, there's what Danae is saying is totally accurate, which is like, when we are that person, we also can get addicted to the righteousness and the anger, because it's like, I get to finally feel this. Like, fuck you, I'm going to
Hmm.
hold on to it.
Yep.
And I do find sometimes, like, even in my partnership, I'll say to him sometimes, like, you need to let me be angry. This is important for me to actually be able to feel, because I spent a lifetime quickly trying to get over things because I didn't have time to be in that state and also stay in attachment with my family.
Yep.
So this is why I also am saying there's no right or wrong. Everything that A and I are saying is a take it or chuck it, right? But also don't like cognitively force yourself into a state that you might also not be in yet, because a little bit of that might be you also just being like, okay, like you said, it's pressure. All right, I got to be the one that I'm the peacekeeper. You used that word earlier. It's always been your role. They're all looking at you again to be the peacekeeper. Come on, aren't we good
Yep.
yet?
Right.
No, maybe we're not. And that's okay. And so it's like what Danae said. He is allowed, it is his family. He is allowed to go and have his time with them, but I just need a little bit more space and a little bit more time to be in this with myself and be with
Yep.
that little girl and help her in
Yep.
her healing journey, you know?
Yeah. Well,
So
thank you
do
so
me a
much.
favor, us a
Mhm.
favor. Yes, of course. Keep us posted. Let us know. I'd love to know over the next kind of couple months how this plays out, and just let us know. Keep us posted.
Sounds good. I will.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Have a good
Thank you
day.
so much. You
Take
too.
care of
Bye bye.
yourself, love.